In this lesson, we'll learn how to use the automatic plane positioning feature to quickly establish new perspective planes. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we began building our skyscraper here. Now, we're going to, from here on out, be moving along, just continuing to build this skyscraper, and we'll continue to address new features and workflows as we get to those here. So, I tell you what, in looking at this, I'm looking at these three protrusions off of our skyscraper, and, you know, I think it's time to create the main body of the skyscraper, or the plane that sits on. Now, it's going to be the exact same plane as these second objects here that we created by using the left grid plane controls copy feature here in the last lesson. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here and I tell you what, let me switch to my normal selection tool. I'm going to grab this shape right here and make a copy off to the side. Now, we'll go ahead and just slide that off to the side here, and you can see that this is its own shape, its own masked object. Now, for this object, let's go ahead and hit Shift V again to switch to our perspective selection tool, and we're going to go ahead and bring that into perspective here. Now, let's go ahead and look at where we're going to bring this. Are we going to bring this onto the original x-axis here, or are we going to move this grid plane control back to its location we explored in the last lesson? Well, we need to actually move that to this plane, the second plane that we established. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that control, and I believe I still have that value in my clipboard here. So let me just go ahead and paste that in, and we're going to not move any of the objects now. We're just going to move the plane itself. So let's go ahead and move that back here, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this object, and we're going to snap that into perspective using our snap to perspective grid feature. Now I want to go ahead and just drop this a little further back. Alright, so there we go. We're snapped to our x-axis. If we look at the transform panel, you can see that we're actually just a little bit below that here. So let me go ahead and input a 0 value on the y-axis and get that snapped in exactly to that perspective plane. So now let's go ahead and move this to the back with a Control-Shift open bracket. So we get that as the very back object here. Now you might be thinking to yourself, oh, let's go ahead and position this by setting it to the origin, by coming up to the transform panel, using the reference point at the bottom right corner and set the x value to 0. Just like so. And we could do that, but I want to point something out to you really fast. Let's take a look at how that plane, this angled edge, matches up with our protrusions. And we'll come back over here to our orthographic reference. Now, if you look here closely, you can see that these protrusions not only protrude from the side of the building, but they also protrude up just a little bit. So this is actually going to be recessed a little bit back. So let's go ahead and zoom in here and explore how we can fix this plane and move that back just enough on our x-axis. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to kind of focus in on this first protrusion right here. I want to go ahead and hide this plane right here. And in order to do that, you can come up to Object and choose Hide, Selection, or you can just use that keyboard shortcut right there, Control 3. And to be honest, that's what I use most of the time when I'm going to hide an object, because what I want to get to is the bottom left-hand corner of this plane right here. So let's go ahead and look at that here. I'm going to go to the Transform panel again, and let's select the bottom left corner and make that our reference point. And you can see here the value on the x-axis is negative 227.91 points. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that value here, and let's go ahead and deselect that object. Now, looking at this plane right here, I know that while it's recessed a little bit off the front of our building, it's going to be flush. The back side of it is actually flush. So let's go ahead and, with this plane selected, let's go ahead and come to the Transform panel and paste that value into the x-axis here, based on this bottom left corner reference point. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that value in here, and we're going to hit Enter, and we're going to move that back just a little bit. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and zoom in and just kind of check the basically what we've done here. You can see now that those protrude just a little bit above that plane. So that's exactly what we were wanting. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and reveal the hidden object now. And if you remember, the keyboard shortcut to hide it was Control 3. Well, the keyboard shortcut to reveal that hidden object is going to be Control Alt 3. Or you can also come up to Object and choose Show All right there. So we'll just go ahead and use Control Alt 3, bringing back our hidden object, and we've repositioned this plane into its new position, and we're ready to go. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on and explore the next object that we're going to draw here. So I want to come in here and zoom in, and I tell you what, let's go ahead and switch this left grid plane back to its 0 point. Alright, so we've got these protrusions pretty much drawn as far as two of the planes, but we've got some other planes that are going to be visible to us from this vantage point that we haven't drawn yet. And I want to go ahead and address these vertical planes on the inside of these columns right here. And this plane right here. And we're actually going to save these planes that are at an angle here for just a moment, but let's go ahead and focus on these two planes right here. Now, remember, we've already established a width of these objects. If we come over here to our orthographic drawing and select this object, again, we've established our width right here. And I'll go ahead and just make sure we have that copied to our clipboard, and let's come back over here. Now, there's a few different ways we could go about creating these shapes. We could obviously come in and draw those in with our pen tool, but that's not going to create them in perspective. So what we need to do is we need to establish a perspective line or perspective plane that goes to our right vanishing point. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our right perspective plane, clicking on the perspective switching widget up here. And alright, so we've got our right plane selected. And now we could do a couple of different things. We could actually drag the little widget right here all the way over here and try and line that up just perfectly where this plane is going to sit at the corners of these two existing planes. Or we could come in and use the automatic plane positioning features of perspective drawing, which is actually a really helpful tool. And the way to do that is all you need to do is mouse over an anchor point and hold down the shift key. So let's go ahead and create this first one right here. I want to mouse over this point right here, and you can see that I have that selected. I want to mouse over that and hold the shift key. Now, if you need some help knowing exactly when you're mousing over an anchor point, consider turning on your smart guides. Again, the keyboard shortcut for that is Control U. So I'll go ahead and turn those on, and you can see here that we're mousing over an anchor point. You can see the little green text that says anchored right there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that shift key. And you can see here that we have shifted the right perspective plane grid to its new position right here. Now, I tell you what, did we make a permanent change to that right perspective grid? No, that's a temporary position change. So what we now can do is draw in our new shape right here. And as soon as we draw that shape, that perspective grid is going to go back to its original location. Now, if we decide we've accidentally shifted our perspective grid, we can actually just click out and away, or we can hit escape, and it'll go back to its original position. But I tell you what, let's come back over here and reposition that again using automatic plane positioning. And let's go ahead and draw in our shape. Let me go ahead and grab our rectangle tool using the M keyboard shortcut. And I want to go ahead and just mouse over this anchor point again, and we're going to start right here. And I'm going to draw that in, and you can see that we're using our smart guides again to know when we're over that second anchor point. And we're just going to draw this shape up. Now I'm going to go ahead and drag that up a little bit. We'll actually modify that shape here after I zoom out, but I'm going to go ahead and release that there. And grab my perspective selection tool again using Shift V. And we'll go ahead and grab this center control on this top edge and continue to drag that shape up. Now, let me go ahead and change the color of that so it has a little bit more contrast. We'll go ahead and switch that to a little darker color here, just like so. Alright, so we need to go ahead and drag that up a little bit more here. I'm going to go ahead and continue dragging, and we've got a corner right here. It's a very subtle corner. It's maybe kind of hard to see, so we'll just zoom in nice and tight on that. And we'll drag that up, and we're not going to have any kind of a snapping feature to help us here, so I'm going to eyeball that and just make sure we get that exactly where we want it. So that looks pretty good. Let me go ahead and zoom out now. And notice here that our perspective grid for this right plane is back in its original position, and it went back to that original position as soon as I released the initial shape that I drew for this face. So we're going to go ahead and repeat that process again for this face right here on this column. I tell you what, let me go ahead and mouse over this anchor point again and hit my shift key. And again, you can see we've shifted that perspective grid. So we'll go ahead and again draw in this shape using our rectangle tool, and I'll mouse over this intersection right there, that anchor point, and we'll just draw in our shape. And right there's good. We'll have to zoom in a little closer. We'll go ahead and release that, and you can see again the perspective grid shifts back to its original location. So we'll go and zoom in on this, switch to our perspective selection tool using Shift V, and we'll just reposition this and stretch that up to that corner right there. Zooming in nice and tight, making sure we're right on the corner. That looks pretty good. So, all right, we've now learned how to use automatic plane positioning in order to shift our planes around temporarily. Now, there are some additional options for automatic plane positioning you should probably be aware of. And we've actually already seen those options, but we kind of skipped over those. So I tell you what, let me come over here, and it looks like we've actually shifted the viewing mode for this horizontal grid plane. So let me go ahead and alt-click on that to bring our grid back. And let's go ahead and double-click on either one of our perspective tools again, accessing the perspective grid options. Now, we looked at this in a previous lesson when we were looking at how to move this active plane widget around and how to hide that. Now, we've also got the automatic plane positioning options here as well. You can see by default, we can automatically shift the position of our planes to anchor points of perspective artwork or the intersection of grid lines. So you can enable or disable both of those options right here. So those are the options for the automatic plane positioning. Let me go ahead and click OK on that. Now, I can't tell you what a great tool automatic plane positioning really is. In my own workflows, I use it constantly. So I would go ahead and practice using automatic plane positioning to draw some different objects in your own files. And when you come back, we're going to continue on where we left off in the next lesson.